When it comes to the crypto reserves, Bitcoin is the OG. It was created in 2009 by a pseudonymous person named Satoshi Nakamoto in an infamous white paper. Now, what Bitcoin first proposed is a solving of the double spend problem. It was a way to transfer or make a peer-to-peer transaction with no middleman. And what's important about the Bitcoin white paper, and things that I touched upon in previous lessons, is that it incentivizes consensus. Consensus among untrustworthy actions, or miners, a network of them. And because we've incentivized consensus, we can come to a truth. And this is what the proof of work consensus mechanism details. Now, importantly, there's some limitations to Bitcoin. And the most common one is that the block size problem. Now, Bitcoin blocks can only reach 1 megabyte in size, and that limits the transactions per second to about 4 to 7 transactions per second. If you compare that to Visa or Amex or other existing payment networks which transact 2,000 transactions per second, you can see that Bitcoin has had some problems scaling as a transaction mechanism. However, there are some protocols in the works, specifically the Lightning Network, which will allow for off-channel payments of Bitcoin and create the ability to have more transactions per second than both the Visa and the Amex network. So that's a very exciting development for Bitcoin, and I'm expecting it around summer 2018. Bitcoin, Litecoin, Ethereum, Bitcoin Cash, Tether. I'm sure you've heard at least 2 or 3 of these mentioned when it comes to cryptocurrencies. But do you know how they started or what problems they were designed to solve? Which is the most valuable? And how do you value them? At the end of this section, you'll be able to compare the different reserve currencies and differentiate value and usefulness of these reserve currencies. So in this section, we're going to talk about the different crypto reserve assets. But first, let's give a background on what exactly is a reserve asset. Now, when you think of reserve currencies, the first thing that comes to mind is the US dollar. And since World War II, the dollar has been the reserve currency. It's widely held by other central banks. It's also very liquid. It has the deepest financial markets. And lastly, the dollar is considered a safe haven. If there's any exogenous shocks around the world, other countries and governments buy the US dollar as protection. And what's interesting to note about the dollar as the global reserve is that the US economy was the largest economy in the 19th century, but it wasn't until World War II that the dollar replaced the English pound as being the global reserve. So these are some important context to put things in before we start talking about the different crypto assets in the space. Now, here's a chart of the total market cap of every single large crypto asset. And you'll notice that Bitcoin was the only game in town for years. In fact, it wasn't until January of 2017 that Bitcoin's market share, which was over 80%, really started to fall. In 2017, you saw the rise of Ethereum and Litecoin. And then in August of 2017, the Bitcoin blockchain forked and you had Bitcoin Cash come around. You've also seen a rally in other coins, different altcoins. I showed you in an early lesson that there's now 1,500 cryptocurrencies, so they fall in this category of altcoins. So it's important to keep this in mind, the different assets and what percent they make up the total system when you're thinking about what exactly you want to invest in. Now that you understand what a reserve currency is, let's move on and talk about the crypto reserves. Now you've seen that a reserve currency is something that's both widely held and freely traded on multiple exchanges, and also offers more liquidity than other ones. And so that's why I've named this category the crypto reserves. They're Bitcoin, Ethereum, Litecoin, Tether, and Bitcoin Cash. Now the next crypto reserve currency is Bitcoin Cash. Now Bitcoin Cash is a little controversial because it started as a fork to Bitcoin's blockchain. And by fork, what I mean is there was a group of developers and miners that decided they didn't like the way things were going with Bitcoin, so they created a fork in the network, and this maintained the same DNA as Bitcoin with some slight modifications. The problem with the original Bitcoin network was it really Satoshi's vision? Bitcoin had grown so large that it was unable to handle as many transactions as were trying to be processed. I noted in an earlier lesson that with a 1 megabyte block size, you only get 4 to 7 transactions per second. Now, Bitcoin Cash increased the block size to 8 megabytes, which should facilitate more transactions per second and more commerce. Now, Bitcoin Cash wasn't really taken that seriously in the beginning, but in December, it was added to Coinbase. And once it was added to Coinbase, the value of Bitcoin Cash jumped dramatically, sometimes 2 to 3 times in one specific day. And since then, people are more freely trading and owning Bitcoin Cash than in the past. So it looks like this crypto reserve currency is here to stay. Now, the second largest cryptocurrency is Ethereum. Now, Ethereum has many similarities to Bitcoin, but there's also some improved functionality. It was proposed in 2013 by a genius named Vitalik Buterin. In fact, after he wrote the Ethereum white paper, he thought he was going to go back to school. His life really changed after that. Ethereum is a decentralized global computer. EVM stands for the Ethereum Virtual Machine. Now, with Ethereum, you can write these conditional contracts. You can base contracts on some logical steps that need to be met before payment is sent. So you can think about different businesses we can run off a decentralized global computer. For instance, they're already piloting flight insurance off of it. If you pay a certain amount for a flight and your flight doesn't leave within 2 hours, then you're compensated for the flight not leaving. And this is done in a decentralized way. There's no person that needs to check whether or not the flight left. The computers do it. So there's a standard that Ethereum has created called ERC20. And off this standard are written these tokens that have been part of the ICO boom in 2017. And these are all decentralized applications that run on the Ethereum platform. Remember all those tokens we spoke about in an earlier lesson. Now, one thing to note about dApps is you can see them on stateofthedapps.com. There's over 1,000 of these protocols available. And if you go to that website, you can go research and see everything that's built on the Ethereum blockchain.